Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. The price of a Class 9 decomposition cannon was exorbitant. Even they were not equipped with these cannons. On top of that, this enemy they were facing could not be detected by any of the surveillance soul tools they had brought with them. When the Class 9 decomposition cannon was fired, the two Class 9 soul engineers had immediately activated the strongest surveillance abilities they possess. After all, a Class 9 decomposition cannon could only be fired within 3,000 meters. However, they were still unable to pinpoint where that person was. This meant that they could only react passively to that person's attacks. How were they supposed to not develop a fear of Huo Yuhao? Shu Qianyuan started to become panicky. He knew it would take them close to 8 hours before they reached the territory of the Sun Moon Empire, which was also the former land of the Heavenly Soul Empire. At the same time, they had to do their best to avoid any encounters with troops from the Do Ling Empire. If this unknown enemy were to follow them throughout the entire 8 hours, it would be a massive disaster for both Soul Engineer Legions. In fact, the current situation of the two Soul Engineer Legions simply would not allow them to maintain their defenses and fly at the same time for 8 hours. They had to descend to rest and reorganize their forces. What should we do? Shu Qianran gritted his teeth as he communicated with Xie Xianchen. We need to let everyone rest. Right now, our team's morale isn't doing very well. If he launches another decomposition cannon and successfully kills another person, we'll be in trouble. Xie Xianchen looked at him and asked, Brother Shu, what do you think we should do then? Shu Qianran replied, we need to descend right away. My Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion will take turns with your legion to maintain our defenses. At the same time, we need to make sure our groups huddle together. This will make the linked defensive barrier thicker, and will help to reduce the effectiveness of the decomposition cannon. Even though we might not be able to stick too close to one another in the air due to the possibility of collisions, we can do so on the ground. Let's continue discussing this after we let our people recover their energy. We need to think of a way to handle this. I guess we have no choice but to follow what you say. Xie Xianchen was also out of ideas. Both of them immediately gave the order to the remaining members of the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion, and Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion to descend. They chose to rest up and reorganize their forces within a forest. They used their soul tools to clear some of the trees to create an empty plot of land to set up camp. The Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion would take the outer ring, while the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion would take the inner one. Both legions would take turns to maintain their defenses. At the same time, because of their relatively more compact formation, the strength of their linked defensive barrier was also enhanced. Xie Xianchen, Shu Qianyuan and some of the other vice commanders gathered. They could see the looks of dread on each other's faces. They were all members of the hand that protects the nation. Even within the Sun Moon Empire, they were all extremely highly regarded. Even Shu Qianran would speak to them courteously when he bumped into them. This was especially true for Shu Qianyuan, considering how he was part of the royal family. However, they were in serious trouble this time around. Their enemy, who was hiding in the dark, was simply too difficult to handle. The biggest problem was finding their enemy. What was the use of their firepower if they couldn't even locate a target? They could only passively wait for the enemy to attack them. No, we can't wait like this. If we continue to wait for him to attack, we will eventually be destroyed by him. In fact, once we lose a substantial number of soul engineers, the others might just start a mutiny. Xie Xianchen hammered his fist into the ground, sending a cloud of dust into the air. Shu Qianyuan nodded and said, we must find a way to lure these two people out before we kill them. We still have a long way to go before we reach our destination. Even if we were to enter what was formerly the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory, we would still have to fly towards Shrek City and link up with the rest of the army. It would simply take too much time. If this continues, most of us will probably perish along the way. The vice commanders nodded as they waited for orders from their superiors. Brother Xie, you're the quick-witted one among us. Propose something we can work on. Even if it's a little risky, it's still better than not having anything to work with. Xu Qianyuan said. Xie Xianchen nodded and said, I think our central strategy revolves around our need to lure him out before launching an all-out attack against him. From what I have observed, both of them are extremely powerful. They are probably, at the very least, transcendent Doluo. One of them could either be a Class 9 Soul Engineer, or a Soul Master who possesses a Class 9 Decomposition Cannon. To locate them, we must first destroy their means of turning themselves invisible. Previously, we have already tried to use a variety of surveillance soul tools, but to no avail. The range of the spiritual surveillance soul tools is too small. They can't be used to locate them. Thus, we have no choice but to go back to basics. First, we will have to bait them into attacking us. Following which, we will employ the carpet bombing method to identify their exact position. Based on our previous observations, they need a bit of time before they can disappear. As long as we are prepared to concentrate our attacking power on them, there's no way they can escape without being heavily injured. Once they are heavily injured, they'll probably stop chasing after us. And we would then have achieved our objective. Xu Qianyuan's eyes lit up as he nodded in agreement. Sounds good. Let's follow what you have just proposed. We'll first allow everyone to rest up. Afterward, we will need our guys to get ready to do some carpet bombing, while I will bring our 4 vice commanders to launch a mini-linked offensive attack. I believe our firepower should be sufficient if we focus all of it on one of them. Brother Xia, I need you to command the rest of our people, including my Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion. As long as they dare to come near us, I am certain they will not be able to retreat without being injured. As he looked at the vicious look on Xie Xuanchen's face, Xu Qianyuan nodded earnestly. Since Brother Xu is agreeable, let's do this then. We will work together and get rid of this troublesome duo. This will also allow us to return earlier to report on our work. Now that Douling City has been destroyed, the Douling Empire must be a mess. Who knows? The commander might have a change of plans and require us to provide support. Yes. Xu Qianyuan might have agreed verbally, but his eyes seemed to show the doubt he had in his mind. Similar to his dislike for Xu Tianran, he was also not a big fan of Zhu Zi. However, he had to admit that the War God Empress was incredibly capable. Many of the people in the royal family, as well as the elders of the Sun Moon Empire, could neither find a reason to reject her appointment as the marshal nor afford to disobey her orders. As of now, her popularity in the Sun Moon Empire as the War God Empress was sky high. In fact, her reputation might have even exceeded Xu Tianran's to a certain extent. This was especially true after the Heavenly Soul Empire fell victim to her tactics. As Xie Xianchen left to prepare the rest of the legions for the trap, Xu Qianyuan and the 4 vice commanders sat down and began their rest. The Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion did not dare to treat their work lightly as they concentrated on maintaining the linked defensive barrier to protect everyone. Huo Yuhao and Tang Wutong were observing everything from above as they floated in the sky. That single blow of yours must have frightened them. Look how they have decided to land and protect themselves in that tight formation of theirs. Will their linked defensive barrier become stronger because of that formation? Tang Wutong asked Huo Yuhao. Huo Yuhao nodded and said, yes. From the looks of their current formation, the decomposition cannon should still be able to penetrate their barrier. However, it probably won't have enough energy left to kill a person. It seems like these 2 Soul Engineer Legions will be a lot more difficult to kill than I thought. However, I can already guess what they're about to do next. Oh really? Tang Wutong asked curiously. Huo Yuhao explained, even though the decomposition cannon might not be able to deal with them, it should be enough to deter them from returning to the sky. When they are flying, Soul Engineers must keep a safe distance from one another, because their flying soul tools eject soul power. This distance might be negligible if there are only 1 or 2 people flying together. But if they have a few hundred people flying together, they have to spread their linked defensive barrier outwards. This causes the barrier to thin out, resulting in it losing the ability to block my decomposition cannon. And once the number of dead people increases, the legions will crumble from within. After all, none of them would know who the next target would be. Hence, if I were their commander, and I wanted to ensure that all of them retreat safely instead of being blown to bits by me, my next step would involve luring us out before taking us down. Tang Wutong smiled and replied, then that would be simple. As long as we don't react to their bait and never appear in front of them, we will be safe. I don't see how else they can handle us. As long as we wait till they set off again, before we make our next move, there's no way they can trouble us. However, Huo Yuhao shook his head as his eyes flashed with a steely look. Since they want to bait us out with an intentional mistake, let's take the bait. In fact, we will grab it with all of our strength, and crush whatever hopes they still have. Let's go and make our preparations. As he spoke, he grabbed Tang Wutong's hand before turning around and flying into the distance. In the meantime, the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion was taking a break by meditating, while the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion maintained their defensive infrastructure. They were already a considerable distance from Do Ling City. It was unlikely that there would be any soldiers chasing after them, considering how chaotic Do Ling City should be right now. Very soon, 2 hours had passed, and the Soul Engineers from the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion had basically recovered their soul power. However, they had no time to refill their milk bottles. Now it was time to rotate, as it became the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion's turn to rest, while the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion maintained the linked defensive barrier. Xie Xianchen was able to command both legions in a seamless manner, while Xu Qianyuan and the 4 vice-commanders continued their meditation, as though everything that was happening around them did not concern them. Huo Yuhao and Tang Wutong had flown up again to see what the current situation was like. After seeing how disciplined they were, Huo Yuhao could not help but frown. His enemies were harder to deal with than he had thought. They were surprisingly composed, even when they were threatened by 2 powerful soul masters. The Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion's soul engineers have basically recovered their soul power. Now it's the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion's turn. Regardless of whether they plan to bait us or leave, they must first get back into their best state. It's apparent that they want to see who is more patient. Huo Yuhao explained to Tang Wutong. Tang Wutong grabbed his arm and smiled. Why should we hurry when they're not even hurrying? Let's get back down. A thought suddenly appeared in Huo Yuhao's mind. Wutong, since they have given us ample time, I have an idea. Destroying these 2 Soul Engineer Legions might not achieve the best effect. Huh? Tang Wutong's eyes widened. Huo Yuhao whispered next to Tang Wutong's ear as he explained his idea to her. Immediately, Tang Wutong revealed a strange expression on her face. That's so bad of you. HMPH. Do you dare to say that you aren't doing this for Juzi? Huo Yuhao immediately tried to clarify, of course not. If I remember correctly, the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion is the most powerful legion that the Sun Moon Empire's royal family controls directly. The royal family must value this Soul Engineer Legion with great importance. Juzi is not the only one who knows how to set up an overt scheme, is she? There is no longer any chance of us winning the war in a direct manner. After the palace in Do Ling City was destroyed, we don't even know if any members of their royal family are still alive. Hence, we can only turn the tables around bit by bit. I want you to take 10,000 steps back and consider this. If the Sun Moon Empire were to conquer the entire continent in the future, wouldn't it be better for it to be under Juzi's control rather than Shu Tianran, or the Holy Ghost Church? Tang Wutong burst into laughter and said, Look at how nervous you've become. I was only testing you. Do you really think I don't trust you? Huo Yuhao also smiled and said, Of course I know you will believe me. But I still think there's a need to explain. It is a form of respect for you. Come, let's descend. As he spoke, Huo Yuhao pulled Tang Wutong's hand and disappeared into the woods. Of course, the place they descended to was quite far from where the 2 Soul Engineer Legions were. In the meantime, the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion was still patiently recovering their soul power. It had been a long time since they were attacked by Huo Yuhao and Tang Wutong. Even though the evil tyrant Soul Engineer Legion would not become complacent because of this, they were still grateful for the peace that they had been enjoying for the past few hours. It now seemed like Xu Qianyuan was right to say that the enemy only had one chance to strike them with the Class 9 decomposition cannon. Xie Xianchen had been monitoring their surroundings for any movement. In fact, he did not even dare to sit down and cultivate. The next thing he was about to do was set up the trap. This trap had to trick the enemy into believing that both of them had a chance of defeating the legions. He was ultimately different from the Soul Engineers under him. He could never relax when he knew that his enemies were still out there lurking around. He believed that they would not give up so easily after following them into the forest. It was common for strong soul masters to have patience that could outlast most people. How could they have attained their powers without the ability to withstand loneliness and be patient? A significant amount of time went by very quickly. Very soon, the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion would all have fully recovered the soul power they had expended. Following which, it would be time for them to complete their trap. This also happened to be the most dangerous moment. It was understood by everyone that some of them had to be sacrificed in order to bait their enemies. However, Xie Xianchen could not help but feel a sense of fear about his mysterious, powerful enemies, who seemed to be wielding Class 9 decomposition cannons. Commander, one of our surveillance soul tools has indicated that someone is heading in our direction. A soul engineer from the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion suddenly reported. His words startled Xie Xianchen. Someone's coming. How many of them? Xie Xianchen immediately became very alert as he questioned his subordinate rapidly. Could they have lost their patience? There are a lot of them. They seem to be coming towards us by land. On top of that, they are currently surrounding us. The Soul Engineer who was providing the update was visibly nervous, because the size of the enemy force was simply enormous. The only possible people who they could encounter in the Douling Empire must be their enemies. And these enemies seemed to have managed to pinpoint their location, and were now surrounding them. A solemn look formed on Xie Xuanchen's face. Their reinforcements have arrived. If that's the case, the odds against us have become a lot worse. However, he was not really afraid of their reinforcements. After all, the Douling Empire was the weakest empire on the Doluo continent. In fact, they did not even have a proper Soul Engineer Legion. No matter how many people, including Soul Masters, they had sent to surround them, Xie Xianchen would not be afraid of them. After all, they were going up against two Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer Legions that were part of the hand that protects the nation. Even though these legions had lost more than a third of their people, the bulk of their force, especially the most powerful Soul Engineers, was still present. Get everyone other than the 5 commanders to get ready for battle. Xie Xianchen ordered. He was no longer concerned about the trap for now. He knew he had to focus on fending off the enemies that were surrounding them before he could think about the trap. In fact, he believed their attack could help act as a trap or bait for his 2 other enemies. He might just be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. While he was issuing orders, Xie Xianchen quickly moved over to the surveillance soul tools. It was apparent that running their aerial surveillance soul tools in a foreign land would not be as effective as running them in their own territory. Hence, they had only brought land surveillance soul tools with them. Even though they had a smaller range, they were a lot more accurate. Xie Xianchen could see a lot of red dots scattered on the screen of the surveillance soul tool. If every red dot represented a single enemy, he was actually unable to determine how many people they were up against. These enemies were apparently very calm and composed as they moved towards them slowly. Even though they were not moving very fast, they had already completely surrounded them and were advancing at a very steady speed. As of now, the Soul Engineers still did not know what their enemies looked like. The dense forest prevented them from seeing their enemies. However, it was enough for them to know that their enemies were approaching them. Every single Soul Engineer within the legions was ready for battle. This included the Soul Engineers from the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion, who had recovered a large portion of their energy, but were ultimately still not fully recharged. After taking some time to analyze their situation, Xie Xianchen ordered, Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion, fire your soul light rays and clear the trees that are blocking our way. Fighting in forests had always been relatively disadvantageous for soul engineers. This was because soul engineers specialized in ranged attacks. It was a lot harder for them to take aim when there were trees surrounding them. After hearing Xie Xuanshen's orders, streaks of blue rays started to sweep around them as they cleared every tree within 1,000 meters of them. This created a large amount of space outside the linked defensive barrier. There would be no hiding for any enemy who chose to appear before them. They would be subjected to the powerful soul tool attacks from both legions. After a short and intense wait, the soul engineers could finally see their enemies. However, they could not help but shudder after seeing what their enemies looked like. No matter how strong their enemies were, the members of the two Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer Legions had never experienced fear before the battle had even begun. However, these enemies before them were able to strike fear in their hearts. Because they were not humans. What are those things? Huge skeletal structures, wielding irregular bone knives, were trotting towards them. Some of them were just armed with a single bone. A few of them were green zombies, which were hopping forward. Some of those zombies had humongous stomachs, as foul-smelling liquid dripped from their bodies. On top of that, some of their enemies were extremely strange-looking. They saw headless knights, humongous Frankensteins, and all sorts of scary-looking creatures they had never seen before in their entire life. All of these creatures were radiating a powerful aura of death. No normal human being would feel good after sensing such a powerful, dense aura of death. These soul engineers were no exception. Xie Xianchen was also not exempt from this rule. He had never expected the calm and patient enemy he had imagined in his mind to be a spectral army. This was simply beyond his imagination. He had never expected to be facing an enemy like this. Xie Xianchen ran towards Xu Qianyuan without any hesitation, as he woke the commander of the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion up. When Xu Qianyuan and the other 4 vice-commanders were woken up from their meditation, their jaws dropped upon seeing the spectral creatures trotting towards them. Xu Qianyuan immediately flew into a rage as he clenched his fist and exclaimed, "Those bastards! I knew it! I was wondering how our enemies could have gotten their hands on Class 9 decomposition cannons. After all, those cannons are guarded with secrecy, even within our empire. Now everything's starting to make sense. I can still remember how resistant I was back then when His Majesty wanted to form an alliance with the Holy Ghost Church. I remember telling him how we should never associate ourselves with those evil soul masters. I am now certain that those evil soul masters are targeting us after learning about our independent mission. They have taken advantage of a golden opportunity to eradicate us while we are still in the Douling Empire." Xu Qianyuan was not the only one who had these thoughts. Even Xie Xianchen and the other vice-commanders shared the same sentiments. One of the vice-commanders from the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion spoke aggressively. "I don't think there are any powerful cultivators from the Douling Empire who can threaten us. If there is someone like that, he or she would have been dispatched to the main battlefield. If they had someone who could conceal themselves and control spatial power to a certain extent, they would have sent him to perform reconnaissance work and stop us from destroying the Heavenly Soul Empire. It seems like the truth has finally come to light. Those evil soul masters from the despicable Holy Ghost Church. Our army has never been on good terms with them. I can see how they are trying to take this opportunity to weaken the army and the War God Emperor's strength. By doing this, they would have triumphed over us. Who would know the nature of our death now that we are far away from any ally? They've probably sent more than 2 evil soul masters, judging from the number of spectral creatures." After hearing the vice-commander's words, Xie Xuanshen's face revealed the deep hatred he had developed for the Holy Ghost Church. Now that the evil soul masters had revealed themselves, this meant that they were confident of killing all of them here. They were certain that this secret would be buried with their bodies. It was truly a matter of life and death for both parties. Xu Qianyuan spoke coldly. "It won't be so easy for them to kill us. Brother Xia, right now, we can only fight with our lives in order to survive. Those evil soul masters must be hiding somewhere. We need to put all of our trump cards on the table. We need to let them know that our Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer legions are not to be meddled with. Xie Xianchen nodded and said, Brother Shu, you can rest assured that during important junctures like this, my Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion will not scrimp on resources. We will definitely do our best to fight for our common survival. Today, I shall lead our brothers to victory along with you, Brother Shu. Once we get back to the camp, we will give those bastards from the Holy Ghost Church hell. Yes, we'll give them hell when we get back. A few of the vice-commanders exclaimed furiously in unison. Soon, they started to take out all sorts of soul tools and started to take aim. Suddenly, an unknown signal was issued from outside of their linked defensive barrier. Following which, the spectral creatures, which were slowly trotting towards them, suddenly charged towards the barrier like floodwater during the monsoon season. Soul light rays and soul cannons fired repeatedly at the spectral creatures, under the command of a few of the more powerful soul engineers. At that instant, countless spectral creatures were blown to pieces. Their bones, organs and all sorts of strange innards were scattered all over the ground. Huo Yuhao was floating in the sky as he watched the entire battle from a distance with Tang Wutong. Both of them were slightly startled by the firepower the two Beast Lord ranked Soul Engineer legions were exhibiting. Even though they had always regarded these two Soul Engineer legions highly, they still could not help but gasp after witnessing the power they wielded. By now, it should be apparent that these spectral creatures came from Huo Yuhao's spectral demiplane. The number of spectral creatures his spectral demiplane contained was seemingly limitless. Even Huo Yuhao did not know where they were coming from. He was only aware that there was a maximum number of spectral creatures, which could exist within his spectral demiplane at any point in time. After this limit was reached, the total count would not increase. However, if any of the spectral creatures were to die or disappear, the demiplane would regenerate new spectral creatures to make up for the deficit. Now, Little Bai's original body, had truly become the king among all the spectral creatures within the spectral demiplane. He ruled over almost every single spectral creature within the demiplane. Most of the spectral creatures, with the exception of the powerful ones like the Bone Dragon, abided by his orders. Hence, when Huo Yuhao activated his spectral calamity, the spell was a lot more powerful with her by leading the spectral creatures. However, the Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer Legion's destructive power was simply too overwhelming. The Abomination was one of the most powerful spectral creatures within the entire spectral demiplane. It was nearly invincible on land. Even though it was humongous and possessed incredible defensive power, it was still extremely agile and fast. However, its powerful body, which it had always been proud of, could not withstand the devastating blows from the Beast Lord ranked Soul Engineer legions. There was no way they could get close to the linked defensive barrier. In addition, because of their huge size, they were easy targets for the Soul Engineers. Hence, countless abominations collapsed to the ground after shrieking their last howl. More and more spectral creatures were turning into carcasses outside the protective soul barrier. However, the wave of spectral creatures that were swarming towards the protective soul barrier appeared to be endless. Even though Huo Yuhao was not trying to kill these Soul Engineers, he was not prepared to let them go so easily. If they were allowed to return to the Sun Moon Empire without a challenge, he would not be able to achieve his objective. Xu Qianyuan and Xie Xianchen were oblivious towards his movements in the sky. Huo Yuhao had just put away a soul tool that probably symbolized death in their eyes. It had belonged to the Star Sky Doluo. It was the Sun Moon Divine Needle. With Huo Yuhao's current ability, he was definitely able to harness the full potential of the Sun Moon Divine Needle. He had originally planned to use it to destroy the trap they had planned to bait him with. Following which, he would destroy all of the Soul Engineers with Tang Wutong with any method and skill that they possessed. After all, they had more than just Spiritual Tempest as their martial soul fusion skill. However, he decided against that. He felt that the Sun Moon Divine Needle was not very suitable for the circumstances before them. Even though it was incredibly powerful, it was also easy to recognize. Once he used the Sun Moon Divine Needle, he would have blown his cover. It would be extremely disadvantageous for Huo Yuhao to allow the enemy to know who he was. Hence, he decided not to use it. After all, he was the only other known user other than Yu Yulin. Every single soul engineer in the protective soul barrier was in a hyperexcited state, as they rapidly fired the soul tools in their hands. As they saw how the spectral creatures collapsed and died before their eyes, they felt as though an unknown primal need within their bodies had been satiated. Shu Qianyuan and Xie Xianchen slowly heaved a sigh of relief. Even though these spectral creatures looked extremely fearsome, they were still unable to stand up to the firepower of the Beast Lord-ranked Soul Engineer legions. Since that was the case, they no longer found a need to worry about them. No matter how strong the evil soul masters were, they would eventually tire themselves out from sustaining their continuous summoning of so many spectral creatures. And when that moment eventually arrived, it would be the Legion's turn to retaliate and kill them. After all, every Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer Legion had their own trump card. As the Legion commanders, Shu Qianyuan and Xie Xianchen wielded the best soul tools in the legions. For example, the Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell and the high-energy compression milk bottles were soul tools, which were only carried around by the Legion commanders. High-energy compression milk bottles were built from a new technology that the Sun Moon Empire had recently developed. Every single milk bottle was worth as much as a Class 9 soul tool. It could contain as much soul power as a Class 7 soul engineer possessed. On first sight, it seemed as though the cost-benefit analysis of this milk bottle did not make much sense. However, it was important to note that a Class 7 soul engineer was equivalent to a soul sage. A soul sage was at an entirely different level from a soul emperor. The amount of soul power a soul sage could store was hence definitely an impressive amount. To put it simply, if a Class 5 soul engineer were to wield a high-energy compression milk bottle, he would be able to fight continuously for several hours with his Class 5 soul tool without worrying about running out of soul power. As for the power of a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell, there was no need to explain how destructive and effective it was in wartime. The Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion mainly stocked up on high-energy compression milk bottles, while the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion was the legion with the greatest number of Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells among the hand that protects the nation. This was something that even Shu Qianran did not know. The Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion had always been led by a member of the royal family. Even though these members were extremely loyal to the royal family, that did not mean that they must be loyal to the emperor at that point in time. Hence, they would usually hide and stock up whatever Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells they were given. Among all the Class 9 soul engineers, only a selected group of soul engineers knew how to make Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells. The royal family of the Sun Moon Empire not only controlled the wealth of the empire, but also all sorts of rare metals. Hence, by exchanging rare metals for Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells with the Class 9 soul engineers, the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion was able to stock up on these weapons and become more powerful. This was something that only the Legion commanders of the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion knew. Hence, if the Imperial Soul Engineer Legion were to go all out, even the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineer Legion might not be able to defeat them. The Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion was effectively bribing their way to victory. This was also why the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion was extremely highly regarded by members of the royal family. In fact, most of them felt that as long as they could control the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion, they could, to some extent, control the entire destiny of the Sun Moon Empire. Shu Qianyuan was the current commander of the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion. As a person who was obsessed with power, he would most definitely bring a huge pile of those weapons that could decide the destiny of an empire. However, the Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells they had used to bomb Doling City were the ones which were drafted for use by the army. They did not belong to him. However, he was now prepared to use all of his trump cards to ensure his legion's survival. Even though the deaths of the soul engineers from his Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion caused him a lot of pain, he knew how the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion would not truly become weaker as long as he held onto these trump cards. Boom. 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 Countless spectral creatures continued to crumble under the ferocious attacks of the Soul Engineer Legions. Smoke was starting to envelop the group as horrifying howls from the dying spectral creatures threatened to deafen the Soul Engineers. After a short moment, the world around them suddenly became quiet. Every single spectral creature, which was within sight of the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion, and the Evil Eye Tyrant Soul Engineer Legion, had been shredded to pieces. Is it finally over? The Soul Engineers within the linked defensive barrier were all panting. Fatigue caught up with them as the adrenaline in their bodies started to wear off. Xie Xianchen looked at the screen of a surveillance soul tool before ordering, "Do not drop your guard. It is not over yet. Our enemies are still here. They seem to be clustering together right now." Yes. Even though there were no longer any spectral creatures near them, the screen showed what there were still large numbers of spectral creatures surrounding them deeper in the woods. These spectral creatures could attack them at any moment. This short pause was a good chance for the tense Soul Engineer legions to catch their breath. It was easy for them to tire themselves out if they were to maintain their fast-paced attacks for extended periods of time. It seems like there are really evil soul masters controlling these spectral creatures from behind the scenes. They have probably stopped their attacks after watching how we were able to slaughter their spectral creatures with ease. Instead of intentionally stopping to control the rhythm of the battle, they probably stopped out of fear. It is said that evil soul masters have to give up a lot to breed and nurture their own avenging spirits, or spectral creatures. Every single death means that they are a little weaker than before. HMPH. Let's see how much longer you evil soul masters can maintain your attack. Our Soul Engineer legions have never backed down from head-on battles like this. Both Xie Xianchen and Xu Qianyuan shared the same sentiments. Unfortunately, they did not know that the person who was controlling the spectral army was not in the least bit concerned about the deaths of his spectral creatures. Huo Yuhao's current spiritual power was already leaps and bounds ahead of his original spiritual power. Back when his spectral creatures were dying under the Legion's fire, he had already noticed some of the finer details that most people would have missed out on. After every spectral creature died, its carcass would release an inconspicuous energy fluctuation. This streak of energy would return to the spectral demiplane through the spectral gate. Initially, Huo Yuhao thought he was seeing things. However, upon closer scrutiny, he realized that he was not hallucinating. The streak of energy was actually the spectral creature's spirit fire. This also meant that only the body of the spectral creature had died. The spectral creature's spirit fire would just return into the spectral demiplane. It was important to note that the spirit fires, which belonged to the spectral creatures within the spectral demiplane, were created by the Calamity Necromancer Electrolux himself. There was actually light-type energy within every single spirit. Hence, even Yi Gai, who was extremely adept at purification, could not purify the spirits within the spectral demiplane. This video will end here.